All right, so this video is going to cover how to use Illustrator for an architecture project, not only to bring in, file place, but also to add entourage, people, arrows, how to edit line types and arrow types using live paint as well. So it'll cover kind of a suite of architectural things that you'll find beneficial. So the first thing, to bring in an image, one of the methods that I like to use is place. So instead of just copying and pasting an image or opening it, you can go to File, Place, and that allows you to drop in an image or graphic that you can then have in your file. And anytime you update this image, whether it's a JPEG or PNG, if you update it somewhere else and hit save, it'll update in your Illustrator file. So it's a way of linking in another image. As architects, this could be one of your drawings, whether it's a floor plan, section, elevation, and you have your boards you're laying out. That way, if you re-render something, just save it, and it'll update in Illustrator. So this is a good way of kind of laying out your boards if you have to do presentation, something like that. All right, so this is also good for dropping in entourage, vector people, plants, things like that. This is just a PNG with a transparent background that was brought in. So again, the other way is to just copy, paste, but the problem with that is it's not kind of linked in. So File, Place, and drop the person in that way, right? Or image, depending on what you're doing. Okay, scale is always important, so make sure that you're scaling people in your drawings accordingly. In this case, what I could have done is maybe drawn a line in my Rhino file that's 6 feet tall. That way I can scale this person to be approximately 6 feet, right? Just as a reference, and then delete the line eventually. So that's one way we get the scale right when we're adding people, if we're not doing that, adding people in Rhino, for example. Okay, so some other things that we want to add to this. This is just an image in the background. I can open up that Illustrator file. Obviously, I haven't edited any line weights yet. So I like to edit line weights before I get into live paint and start editing it that way. I've covered that in previous, lectures, but I think this one, I want to show you guys how to annotate various objects. So you can use the pen tool or the line tool to do this. I also like to work in Essentials Classic. This is the kind of arrangement for the workspace that I like. It gives me access to a lot of these things I need. I'm going to work a lot in stroke and layers. You'll see a lot of that. So I like to dock those to the right and have those. The other thing we want to do, so we want to have an arrow that's calling out different aspects of our project. So we want to annotate this. So what I'm going to do is use the pen tool. I can also use the line tool, but in general, you want to keep your leaders horizontal as much as possible. When you do have to angle them, I'm holding shift to keep that at 45. So when you do have to angle them, keep the angle the same, right? So if I had a series of leaders, I'm going to hold shift and alt and shift to duplicate that. Keep these angles the same, right? So whether that's doing this, whether you have to pull it back like that, always make sure that these are parallel, You don't want to have a lot of different angles. It just adds to the confusion of the drawing. Try to align as much as possible. So once we have leaders set up here, I'm going to adjust this a little bit. And again, if possible, leave this horizontal. So for example, this one, I'm going to delete this end so that this is just a horizontal. Always try to avoid too many intersecting lines too, whenever possible. I'm going to move this over. You always want to avoid overlapping line work and text, but whenever you can, try to just make it as clean as possible. So I have these leaders. There's a lot of different kind of stylistic things you can do with these. I can select one of them. Let's say I want to have a kind of filleted edge or rounded corner here. I can go to Effect, Stylize, Round Corners, and I can set that to preview. And so it gives me kind of a rounded corner there. That was the legacy way to do it. There's a new way to edit these. So if I go to the white arrow, you'll see that there's a dot at this corner. I can just click and drag that and manually round that corner. So if I wanted to soften the corner that way, I could. If I wanted to just double click, I could set the radius a little bit more precisely, 10. All right, so little graphic things like that will help your layouts. And again, it has to be, let's see, the white arrow. Double click and set that to 10. So it's a good way to kind of fillet the leaders or any line work that you want to kind of have a rounded corner for. So to add an arrowhead to these, I'm going to select them, or just select one. Under stroke, you'll use this drop down. I'd prefer if you guys use arrow 10. So it's this one. You can set, so by default, it's scaled for that arrowhead based on kind of the size of the line weight. It's always in relation to that. So I can select this, and if I want to set this to maybe make that bigger, maybe 200%. And again, it's going to be based on my line weight. So if my line weight changes, it's going to scale up my arrowhead too. So just be aware that as you scale up and down your line weights, that'll scale up and down your arrowhead. Okay, so make sure that that's set appropriately when you're doing this. I would use this arrowhead or the dot. So arrow 21, this is another good one. Okay. Arrow 7's okay too, but I would kind of keep it within one of these three to keep things minimal and kind of work graphically with the architecture work that we're doing. All right, and then what I would do to continue this annotation, we'll just call this plywood shelf. Edit the text, so I'm going to change the scale of this. All of your text in any architecture drawing should be all caps. So make sure all of your text is all caps. Use a sans serif font, something with no ornamentation and ornament. The other thing I'm going to do is group these two together. So I have text and I have line work. I'm going to select both by holding Shift. And if I right click, I can say group. So now when I select these with the black arrow, they'll move together. Okay, so that's what I want. If I ever want to edit this, I can just double click it, double click again, and I can modify the text. And then I click out and it's back to its, double click again and it's back to its group. All right, so this will be plywood cabinet. All right, so go ahead and annotate your drawings this way. So we've done kind of stylized round corners, and again, that's under Effect, Stylize. Here you also have drop shadow and inner glow, feather, things like that. I won't go into too much, too many stylized things like that. I think primarily the rounded corner is a good one to have. So you could also use dashed lines. So let's say you're doing an axonometric and you want to have projection lines. So I could have lines that, let's say this is being pulled off of something. Set this to black. So to have a dashed line, I just select it, and under stroke, I'm going to just check this dashed line box. And here you can set the size of the dash and the gap. So if you wanted to create a center line, for example, you could. Let's say I wanted to call out, let's say the center line of this table. Or a property line, for example, you could edit the dash and the gap. So I can select the line. If I set this to maybe 6, the gap to 3, dash, so this is the second dash that it's going to do, so I'll set that to 3 and then gap to 3, and you'll see how that's creating this kind of center line, longer dash, shorter dash, longer dash, shorter. So that's one way to do that, and I can accentuate that a little more. Maybe we'll say 8. We can even bring that dash down a little bit. The second one, we'll set that to 2. All right, so this is a line type for a center line. You'll use this a lot in architecture. Let's say you wanted to create a property line. That's more of a double dash. So let's say this is the property line of your site. Editing it here, again, I've selected it. I'm just going to have a double dash, so I need another 2 and 3 for my dash and gap respectively. Okay, so now this is a property line type. And again, you can still modify this, select it. If I want this to be a little bigger, set that to 10, make it more obvious. So this is a property line type to use. All right, so that's all editing the kind of stroke properties of that. You can also control, so let's say I've created a line like this and I want to edit it or subdivide it even further. You can select it and go to the pen tool, add anchor point. So I can add grips or add control points. In Illustrator, they're called anchor points. So using this white arrow, I can then, modify this. And so you can control how these things come to a corner. So if I select this, I can click on this and it'll make sure that all of my change of directions have kind of a solid edge to them here with this line type. You can even change how the lines are capped. So if I want more of a rounded edge, I can do that. Round the corners. Right? Or I can have them sharp. So little things like that can make a difference graphically in your line work. So definitely pay attention to that when you're doing drawings. Software like Revit will kind of automatically round your edges of your line work. So just be aware of that. Okay, so let's say this is a projection, maybe in an axonometric. I'm holding Alt and Shift, so Alt to duplicate, and I would do something like this. And then one thing to think about too is the line weights. Right now everything is kind of one line weight. I think I exported this with a scene silhouette. I've been working in that layer, so it's not the cleanest at the moment, but I can put all of that on another layer. So to do that, I'm just going to create a new layer. I'm going to put all of my annotations on that layer. So all these lines, I'm just holding Shift and selecting these. I'm going to hit Control X. I'm going to lock these other ones, click on this, and hit Control F to paste in place. Okay, and then I'm going to lock that because I don't want to work on that. So you'll see, since I exported this from a Make 2D in Rhino, I have the scene silhouette as its own layer. So if I want to select everything on that layer, I click on this circle next to it, and it grabs everything, all the kind of artwork on that layer. So I've selected that. This is the line weight for it. I'm going to beef this up to maybe 6. So it's giving me a preview of all this. It's not the cleanest. You know, this would take some cleanup, but this is the way we put together diagrams in Axon or in axonometric, where if it's a 3D view, you want to have a heavy silhouette around the perimeter of the drawing. Okay, so again, this will take some cleanup. I would, you know, fix this. Like that. I'm going to duplicate this over. It's kind of annoying that when I'm selecting these, the color of the layer is actually black here. Yeah, so we can change the color of the layer, double click to the right of the text, thank you, and we can change it to whatever we want. So orange, now when I select this, it's orange, makes it a little bit more visible for me to work with here. Select this, Control C, Control V, and then paste. All right. So I would clean this up too. This isn't actually what that condition would look like, so I'm going to fix that. Right now this layer is locked, so I'm unlocking that, deleting these. All right, so we've changed the line weights. Once we're happy with line weights, and again, I'm going to lock the layer for all of my annotations here. Turn those off for now. I can select all of this and do a live paint. When I do a live paint, it's going to put everything on the same layer, so just be aware of that. If you want to edit line weights and kind of keep the layer organization, do that before you do a live paint. So to live paint, I'm going to hold down on this shape builder tool and go to live paint. You can select the artwork to turn it into a live paint piece of artwork. You can also select everything and go to Object, Live Paint, Make, and you can go in and selectively fill various colors. So again, it's the live paint bucket. K is the shortcut. If I wanted to go in and start using this fill, I can add color to the drawing. You know, this is a good technique if you want to create more of a diagrammatic shading scenario in your image. So, you know, let's say I don't want the realism of kind of actual shadows, but I do want to make this, you know, look three-dimensional and help it kind of stand out as a drawing. So, you know, just be consistent with the faces you use. You know, maybe I want these to be a little lighter. This could be a great way to diagrammatically make something look, you know, three-dimensional. All right, so we've talked about arrows, callouts, line work. Showed people. We can also talk about creating a north arrow. So a really simple, minimal north arrow in architecture. Just use this ellipse tool for a circle. I'll set this to be white. And in an ellipse, right, if I don't hold anything, it'll just be free form, but if I hold shift, it'll be a circle. So for an architectural north arrow, we want this to be minimal. So I'm just going to show a single line representing the north arrow here. And that's going to be thicker. I'll set this to maybe 10 point, making sure the corners are sharp. Do something like that. All right, so this is obviously, this drawing wouldn't have a north arrow because it's a three-dimensional view, but this is the method for creating a north arrow to have on your plans. So in order to create a hatch pattern, Illustrator has a series of kind of preloaded hatch patterns that you can use to fill this rather than just a color or a gradient. To access those, you want to find that library first. So I'm going to click on this kind of swatch arrow and click on this swatch libraries menu. Go all the way down to patterns, and you'll see basic graphics. And any of these are applicable in architecture. So if you want to use textures, you can make this larger by clicking on this hamburger icon, use large thumbnail view, and you'll see the different options. So for example, if I have a solid block that I'm going to use as my earth, you know, there's a lot of different Illustrator graphics you can use. I like to use often a kind of diagonal line like this for sections. You can also use a earth hatch. There's not a lot that is directly related to architecture, like an earth hatch or a concrete hatch would be great, but they don't have them here. But any of these are, you know, doable. Maybe concrete or some kind of plaster or something. This would be good for that. It's like a light sand hatch. So that would be the method to get some of your swatches or hatches used here. And then if you want to, for example, I want a white background to this hatch. I don't want to have just kind of an opaque background. What I'll do is just copy and paste this and set the fill behind it to be a solid white so that it masks out that the background. Okay, so if you have a hatch pattern that you want to use in Illustrator, that's the way to get to it from swatches. And if you go into this library, there's a bunch of other, go to default swatches, there's a bunch there. Patterns, basic graphics, you can find lines, there's different line values as well. Grid. So find something that makes sense, gets the right tone that you're looking for, and use that. All right, so that's it for the tutorial.